podium.
Share the screen first.
Before I minimize.
Yeah, share the screen and minimize.
Yeah,
So
that's
share that in your. Share it in your.
All right, good morning. Believe it or not, one of the hardest parts of this presentation was how do I say hello to you all? Do I say good morning, esteemed colleagues, and Dr. Thompson? Or do I just say, hey y'all, thanks for coming? So we're gonna go with, hey y'all, thanks for coming. I appreciate it, and hello to everybody on Zoom. And also I thank you for your support for taking this hour to hear more about my research and possibly learn more about me. So the title, the overall title of my research is Collateral Consequences, the Impact of Mass Incarceration on African American Men. So the first thing is that I'm gonna go through an introduction, then through what all of us are here for, my research agenda, touch on my teaching philosophy, and a little bit on my administrative experience, service, and then conclude with telling you all, hopefully, or convincing you all, why I'm the best candidate to join the Sandwich School as an assistant professor. So who am I? Anybody want to take a guess at that? Y'all know? So the photo in the middle, I'm a wife and I'm a mother before I'm anything else. That handsome guy to my right is my husband, Claudius, and exactly 10 days from today, we'll be married 15 years. To the left of me is my whiz kid daughter, Savannah, who's 13. And next to Savannah is my 9-year-old son, Phoenix, who still this morning had an issue with one of my slides in the presentation. I'm not gonna tell you all which one, but he's totally against it. Here in the pink shirt, that was my first year of teaching, K through 12. And I thought I looked grown up. My third graders told me on the first day I looked like a student. I've been an educator since 2000. I've taught in the K through 12 system. I taught in court order GED programs in Leon County. I taught as a graduate student at FAMU. I've also taught at Barry University in the undergraduate program in the generalist and clinical courses. And here at FAU, I've been a visiting instructor, an adjunct instructor, program coordinator, soon to be assistant professor. So there's room for growth around here. And Keith, if you're listening, here, the last photo, Phi Alpha, that was just for you. I've been a social worker since 2003. So my areas of research involves justice involved African American men. Keep y'all up. Mass incarceration.
I think, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I think Alan's trying to get in the room.
Thank you, Danny. And what I like to term as the 3 R's, reentry, recidivism, and family reunification.
I wonder if you
I need
left.
to click the slide itself, yeah.
So an overview of my research. The first thing that it does is explore the lived experience of African Americans impacted by incarceration. The next thing, and I'm about to get real fancy, use big words, but on the next slide, hopefully I clarified. But it also expands on the traditional brain-centric neuroscience framework by adopting the current trajectory of a more integrated approach. So in all sciences now, we're hearing more of integrated science and integrated approaches. It goes back to the hierarchy of science And I got to give Phoenix credit for this. It goes back to when we think about physics, how it informs chemistry, biology, psychology, and as he said, not social work, but society. And it proposes that re-entry programs adopt an ecological approach by shifting the focus from individuals, but put more focus on the environmental factors that impact their behavior. And lastly, it focuses on the interactions between psychological and social factors and how they impact my population. So ecological systems theory, and this is where the social worker in me starts to come out. This is one of my go-to models. So I took this theory and I put some examples or traits in from my population to try and give you all a graphic of it. So we have the individual, and that's the psychological level. And we take into accountability personality, attitudes, and fears. And then we have the next level, which is the microsystem. And this is the community level, family and neighborhood. And it starts here at the psychological level because at the individual level, you start to form communities, and those communities start to impact your environment. And then we have the meso, and for my population, that'll be at the local level. That's when we take into account policies and social services. And at the exo, we have the state level, which is when you take into consideration legislation, parole, and probation. And then we have the top level, the national level, where we take into consideration cultural norms and laws. And to simplify, my participants, they start interaction, but very rarely do they impact these different levels because it's a hierarchy model. Those different levels, all those levels impact them. So, problem statement. Number of individuals arrested every year. Anybody gonna give it a shot? In the United States, there's no right or wrong. Everybody get an A+. No, give it a shot, give you the answer. 10 million people are arrested, not convicted, but arrested every year in this country. And the majority of this 10 million cycle in and out of prison, out of jail, 2 or more times within a 12-month time period. So Danny, this is something that's affecting your population, people experiencing homelessness. We've seen many of times when someone is arrested for trespassing, they're released, and within a couple of hours, they're arrested again. So the number of individuals in prison, and there's a difference between jail and prison. Jail is normally anything under 366, and prison is normally anything over 366. So the number of individuals in U.S. prisons, 2.3 million. And I have to say estimated because here in the United States, jails and prisons aren't mandated. They don't have to report how many people are in their facilities. So I would take it would be more than 2.3 million. Now the number of African American men in U.S. prisons. So out of that 2.3, there's an estimated 1.1 million African American men in prisons. So I had a student to challenge me, which I like that from students, and say, oh, it's kind of equal. It's starting to balance out. It's like, yeah, I've seen those articles too, that the system is starting to balance out. But take into consideration, based on the last census, Black people in America only represents about 14% of the total population. And another side note I shared with that student, Everest and Kyle, would y'all like to commit a crime together? I need an example. So it's Black and white. What crime would y'all like to commit? Don't tell us. So say for example, Everest and Kyle commit a crime together. They're arrested, they appear in court before the same judge. More than likely, Kyle is gonna receive a bond that he can afford, or he's gonna be released without posting a bail. Everest, who committed the crime with Kyle, most likely is gonna get a bond that he can't afford, and he's gonna stay in jail longer. So when they go back to court, Kyle is probably gonna get probation, if that, and a fine that he can afford. When Everest go back to court, he's probably gonna get a fine that he can't afford. He's gonna also get probation, and he's probably gonna be sentenced to at least a year and a day. And out of that 1.1 million, approximately 500,000 of those men are fathers. and about 767,000 of these children belong to this man. So this connects to Heather, Mariana, Joy, and Morgan, because we know this situation is putting these children most likely in contact with the child welfare system. So study number 1, and I'm gonna give you an overview of 3 of my studies. You all probably can look at the title and be like, oh, that was a dissertation. That's why that title is so long. I asked myself, why is it that long? Why didn't they stop me? But that was study number 1, a qualitative analysis of African American fathers struggle with reentry, recidivism, reunification after participation in reentry programs. And although this was my dissertation, this was, for me, up to date, kind of like my 3rd child, because I learned so much doing this study. It was hard for me to find the chair because I wanted to go inside of a prison and I wanted to interview men. So they thought that was gonna take too long or it was gonna be impossible. So those of you that work with me closely, you know I'm kind of undercover competitive, right? And the best or worst thing you can tell me is I can't do something or it's gonna be difficult. So someone new came on faculty at Berry and, you know, throwing a new person out there. And she's like, yeah, I'll be your chair. And she thought we was gonna have time to work this out. So with some connections that I have, I made a phone call. I would like to come inside the facility and I would like to do research. I wasn't expecting to hear back so soon. I got an email, can you send me a picture of your driver's license? I was like, oh yeah, he responded, sure. I got another email, can you come on Thursday? It's like, yeah, I guess. So I had to process 2 things first. How do I go home and tell Claudius, yep, going to prison on Thursday? And then I felt like the men that was in my study. I'm just not ready to go to jail yet. Like, I need more time to think about this. And my chair, she was elated. That was like a really good thing for us. So she got creative and seemed like she was down from the beginning. She's like, well, since we have to go through the RRB and you can't turn down this opportunity, how about you go a couple of times and so you can build trust and the data will be much richer doing it. So I was thinking that sounds like a good idea, but did she just sentence me to more time? Just like, you know, and that was the best advice that she could have given me. And then it was time to go to the RRB, and the RRB was fairly difficult. I'm on the RRB here, but they do it a little different at Berry. They put the tables in a U, and you go and you stand in the middle of the U while they look at, no lie, you stand there in the U. And one of the gentlemen commented and wasn't gonna allow me to do the study because he thought that I was a pretty girl. His comment. And I'm glad that people in the room was supportive and let him know that I'm not a girl and I wasn't there to be so pretty. So based off the feedback on that, the IRB approved my study, and eventually I was able to do research with men that were participating in a reentry program called Inside Outside Dad. So my study explored the discrepancy in recidivism rates between African American fathers compared to whites and Hispanics. So while I was trying to find the topic, the gap that I realized was that these men are participating in programs. And many white men are participating in these programs and they're released and they don't go back. But we have black men that's participating in every program. And within a year of being released, they're going back, at least 53% of them. So my participants had to be African American, had to have at least one biological child. And the biological child piece was also important that my chair shared with me from a cultural standpoint. Because when I would ask that question, do you have a biological child? They would say, yeah, I have 5 or 6. And be like, well, this was my girlfriend child who I helped raise. This was that child. I'd be like, but how many children do you have? Oh, I just have 1. So that was a good question to ask. And they had to have multiple convictions in prison to measure recidivism. This was a small sample, just 10. And combined, they spent 79 years in prison. And I see how Ju Young's looking. She's looking like Savannah. When I was working on the graph, she came all the way around. Mommy, what did number 8 do? Did you talk to him? And to give you some background on number 8, today, 2022, Number 8 is only 46 years old. And he's been in prison, not jail, he's been in prison 13 times. And number 8 was 9 years old, and his godmother took Karen and Sharon to a different extent. She's a heroin user. Asked him if he wanted to try, tried it. He's a full-blown addict by the time he was 11. By the time he was 14, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison in North Florida in an adult facility. So he didn't serve that whole 20 years. He served about 14 of those years. And of course, when he got out, right, he learned his lesson. He did right, started a family, came to the FAU probably, right? All those things? Absolutely not. Within a year, he was back in prison again and continued that cycle. When I collected this data, he was recently released and was told, if you come back to court in Palm Beach County, you're gonna be given a life sentence. All of the men in this study, non-violent offenders. Has never hurt anyone physically, non-violent offenders. And not to bring you all down on this beautiful day, number 8, I would also like to share with you, is at an agency here in Palm Beach, and he's now a field instructor and a dynamic class speaker. So he participated in a local reentry program, and he's working with that program, which shows that if it's done right, it can possibly work. So theoretical framework, theory of African American offending. I think this theory was created for me. It was fairly new, and I couldn't find a theory that I thought can really encapsulate what it was to be an African American and to connect to offending. So it's associated with a degree of racial injustice, and the consequences are low self-control, anger, and depression. And because I'm a social worker, I also use family systems theory, because that's one of our go-tos. So methods, it was qualitative. And for phenomenology design, I did a content analysis using in vivo, non-random sampling, and 16 semi-structured questions. I'll talk about my chair again. I went home and came up with 80 great questions. 80, absolutely no lie. She's like, who are you gonna ask them to? I was like, the men. And I did research. I put effort. I went to family members and friends that's been incarcerated before and say, what would you want somebody to ask you? And I think some of them just was talking and I was just writing. So I narrowed it down to 16. She still didn't like the 16 questions. Again, I learned because when I interviewed the men, I only had to ask one question. And without a break, they answered all 16 and provided more valuable information. And that question is, what is your lived experience with incarceration? How has it impacted you, your family, your life, your outlook on life? And the interviews were conducted in person. So findings, I identified several themes and sub-themes. And hopefully as you listen to these men and their voices, you would see why this is a qualitative study, because there's no way to quantify their feelings and their emotions.
I went to alcohol and drugs because I was trying to get over a lot of things, like finding my brother Ricky dead in the house. My mother and father they left all of us in the house to die. It was 8 of us. And they packed up and just left us in the house. Mother and father left. First my father left, then my mother left. My mother always been a church girl. She used to take us to church. Every week we go to church. And when she came home, my dad used to jump on and beat her, accuse of every man in the church. She never drank in her life. And my daddy would hold her down and pour liquor in her, make her drink. And over the years, she just gave in.
So I was around most
Under identities.
And when you're young like that, going into adult facility, you will see guys that older than you, that you grew up with, that you analyze and watch as you was out in society hustling, and you will see those guys incarcerated as well. A couple of your friends around the neighborhood that's older, so I was pretty much in a safe haven, because it was guys that I knew that my brothers, that my son, you know what I'm saying? So I was pretty much good, but with me, it was kind of like, I'm right at home.
So that was participant number 8. He's institutionalized, and how he ended it for me, it was like I was right at home. I'm under
I've
re-entry.
never been a thief. want that drug to satisfy yourself, you do anything. But I never have been a real criminal, but from that time I was more gangster. I thought I could get away with it, but wind up I'm not able to get away with it.
Right, and the next one under recidivism is a little muffled, so I'll play it, then go through it.
If you got a lawyer you can work with, I'm saying, they can come show you love. You call it pray. They'll come and give you $400, someone you love.
So what he was saying, when you're released and you go back in your community, the way that they show love is to give you $300-400 for you to purchase some drugs and for you to get a start. It's kind of like a jump start for you to come up. And the last one, family reunification.
Man, we strangers. Mothers took another way. I was like, they believe most girls believe what their mothers say. You know, my daughters, they believe everything their mothers say. But before I came down here, I got to deal with them a little bit. But after then, you know, I had one that used to call me every week, but she quit calling. You know, hadn't bothered me real bad because of one reason, I done learned to be by myself. So it don't. I can shut down anytime I want to. That's the way I'm fixed now. I'm fixed to just shut down anytime. I can start caring about you and I can shut down because I never had real love in my life.
So if he doesn't know what love is, he never had real love in his life, how do we expect him to parent successfully? That's a question to the child welfare faculty out there. And just an observation, with all of these men, they had sons and daughters, all 10 of them. At the end of the interview, they showed me pictures of their daughters. Not one person showed me pictures of their son. And they showed me pictures of their daughters to show some pictures look like maybe it was when they were younger. And they're very happy to show and tell me that they're pretty just like you and smart. And no one cared to show me a picture of their sons. So, potential research in August. So, study number 2. So, when I teach the research class and I teach the qualitative chapter, I'm really into that because that's my stuff. I even had a student say at the end of the lecture, that's your stuff. So when I embed some of the quotes into my lecture and students asked, could we hear some more? So I pulled up the raw data and let them hear, and they said, I bet you it's some good stuff in there that you didn't get, because just listening to it, it made me think about this. So I like when students tell me what to do and how to do it. So I did a reanalysis of the data from the first study and came up with additional findings. So the first one is reintegrating African American men requires reentry programs to integrate cultural competency. So when I looked back and I looked at the programs, they were treating everybody like they were the same. So for me, that's why African American men weren't doing well in these programs. And the second thing was reentry programs must coordinate with larger systems outside the individuals or programs' immediate control. If all of you were to Google right now reentry programs, just if you did it in Palm Beach County, oh, there are plenty of them. And what happens is that the resources are spread too far and too thin versus if they were collaborating and working together. So I developed a model. I always wanted to make a model. From first grade, I would draw circles and all that, so I was like, now's the time to do it. So the CARE model, it's suggesting that programs implement 4 steps to successfully reunite justice-involved African American men. And before I go to the next set of quotes, I'm going to frame that sort of what we do here as a school in the Sandler School of Social Work.
So, that's like every time I go through South Florida and I want to go take a train, they'll send you to a prison where the train is, but it ain't no train there. It was there.
So for those of you that's not familiar with the prison in Florida, South Florida, what he mentioned is the main hub prison in Miami where you go to before they ship you out. And while you're at South Florida, it's kind of like applying to college. They ask you about your family, they ask you what programs you may be interested in. And supposedly based on that information, that's where they decide may be the best place for you. So he said every time he went, They said it was a trade, so that's why he selected to go there. But when he went there, it wasn't there. So in the mindset of looking at this from a university standpoint, could FAU go to Connecticut and tell students we have a social work program, and when they get here, be like, it's not here? So collaboration is key.
They just bounce stuff around for the government so they can get the income and make you think that they're rehabilitating people to bring them back into society the right way, and it's not. All they want you to do is slave.
So there's no accountability in most of these programs. And then it's because of a lot of red tape. So part of this is policy, amending policies. If we have policies here that doesn't seem to be working or not fair, if we take the bylaws into consideration, what do? We amend those policies.
I had to become their friend again before I could do the father work, you know? They were more or less, you know, they seen them a couple times incarcerated, but you know, that's only when they started to do something wrong, and then they'll bring them up so I can talk to them.
So he is parenting behind bars, which is very common. And I've heard people threaten children, you wait until your dad called tonight at 9 o'clock. And you know, I was thinking like, what would that do? But that's just me. But they need real experience, practical experience, so when they get out, they aren't just shell-shocked. What if here in the social work program, especially at the BSW level, if students just had to take courses with no internship? Would they be successful if they just went out into the world? Probably not at the BSW level.
I got him. I feel better because the Lord just gave him a chance, an opportunity to do more things than I ever did. I know I get to help people.
So he ended with saying that he felt like he can help people because of what he received. Empowerment is a huge piece. Think about when we empower our students. They do a lot better. Even if it's something as simple as a quiz, when you say, you didn't do well on this quiz, meet with me so we can figure out where you went wrong. They usually tend to do better because they feel empowered. So study number 3, and this is a current study, and again, a student thought it would be best to tell me what to do. I listen to them sometimes. The impact of COVID-19 on justice-involved African-American men and women participating in reentry programs in Palm Beach County. So this is my first study as a PI here at FAU. When we got the email that instructors could be PIs, I emailed, I think too quick, they didn't have it all mapped out yet. So I had a little freedom while they figured it out. And this is also my first study with women. So this was different for me. So the students started to call, could you ask Georgia Brown to take me out of my placement? I don't want to be here. I'm burnt out. I don't feel like I can help students. And students who are employed in the field, I was getting those calls and emails. So I want you all to get in the mindset of thinking about if you've been incarcerated and you were released into the COVID world, as I like to call it. So I explored the impact of COVID-19 on reentry programs and services in Palm Beach County. So participants, 25 participants, 12 of them were women, and again, focus on the requirements. So they had to be incarcerated for a minimum of 10 years. So they hadn't been free for at least 10 years. And released after March 13th when COVID was declared a pandemic. So think about all the things that's happened in just 10 years. And then you're released into this world. And these were some of the agencies that actually reached out to me, where we had students at these agencies and was interested in me doing the research and asked what would I need to make that happen. And I just needed Dr. Thompson's signature to make that happen. So the framework, again, the same theory, methods, it was qualitative, and I used the new version of in vivo, and this time I only had 10 questions, and they were good because all of them were necessary. And I conducted the interviews on Zoom. So these are my initial findings. The new directives that were introduced. So in most cases, when you're released from jail or prison, you have to go register. So they still own you, right? Because if you don't register, they can make you go back. Clients could not obtain documents such as driver's license. That's the feedback I was getting from our students because it was shut down. Then when it opened, you had to make appointments. So imagine feeling that frustration if you got 30 days to get ID, to show proof you've been looking for a job, and if you owe child support, that you've been to the child support agency. And these agencies are closed, and when they open up with appointments, the appointments are booked up. And the fear of violating parole or probation, and this is something that impacted one of our students at these agencies who was in this situation, was saying, I'm not going to the agencies because my driver's license expired, and I'm not driving because I don't want to go back to jail. I said, well, I'm kind of in a similar situation. They gave an extension for 2 months. Doctor, oh, I'm not taking that chance. I was like, well, don't take it. And fear relapse due to stress. So one of my questions was about recovery. Do you think this is gonna impact your recovery coming back out into this world? My first study with women, and only women, said yes. The men, I don't know if it was to put on a show for me. Oh no, I'm good, I'm ready. And then difficulty accessing and gaining proficiency in technological applications. So I want you all to go to the mindset when we got that email on a Sunday. Remember, it was a Sunday. We're gonna switch to online. So imagine if you weren't as skilled, or if you were, because I'm pretty savvy with some of that, but having to learn and adjust that quick to that. And we're academics with the whole alphabet behind our names, and we struggle with that. So imagine if you've been in prison and you coming out and they telling you that your appointment is on Zoom. First of all, how do you get the technology? How do you even deal with the Wi-Fi? And how do you operate the system that you've never used or experienced before? Part during the interviews, and it was, I'm not gonna say funny, but interesting. I was asked, oh, so you're not recorded? It's like, no, I'm here. You can really see me? What am I doing? So again, just setting expectations to keep you cycling around in the system. So my research trajectory is to contact DOR, the Faculty Research Mentoring Program, apply for external and internal funding, show y'all the money, and continue to publish the study results of number 3, and continue to collaborate with the FAU College of Science, Criminal Justice, and Education. And continue to engage students in research projects and publishing. On all my rubrics, I add a research component, and students, when they get to practice 3, they like to try to beat you with the code of ethics because they know it, and I remind them of 5.02, their responsibility to evaluate and do research and share knowledge. That's why it's on all the rubrics. And continue to enhance the community partnerships with agencies, police departments, and justice reform initiatives. And I think this blends in well with the school because I don't have to move from Alaska. I don't need a year to build and form relationships. I'm already here and doing the work. So funding opportunities. So, and under the Biden administration, the funding increased by 78%. There's a total of estimated $1.3 billion for justice reform initiatives at state and local levels. In 2021, BJA awarded $12.9 million to 18 community programs, and one of those programs was here in Palm Beach County. The Criminal Justice Commission brought in $3.7 million in a period of 4 years, and this is also from private donors in Palm Beach County. And the National Institute of Justice Challenge competitions, I'm very excited about that, to get the pitching idea with a student for funding. And the Florida Institute for Child Welfare. And here on campus, we have this PJHR, and they have a work group that they give smaller grants to. And they have a mass incarceration work group. So teaching philosophy. Savannah told me don't do it, but I took that picture kind of like here, right, Joy? Like I leaned in like that, so I had to do it. So that's kind of one of my favorite quotes, and it's related so much to research because with students, I always tell them there's no right or wrong in my classroom, just show me that you're trying to think it through. And students usually get frustrated because they just want to know, and they want to know fast. So I think my job is to steer you in the right direction and then let you take control. So on this picture that you may have seen posted in every stall, it's kind of creepy. It just are 3 of my BSW students who came up to me in research class and say, we're interested in the same topic as you. That's what we're gonna do our papers on. And I said, y'all better bring it. And they brought it. So I said, I think we should try and get this published. And it was published. And not only did they get published as BSWs, they got to collaborate with another professor from another university. Of course, after I nurtured and raised them, I sent them to Joy, and they also completed our MSW program, Advanced Standing. So the flipped classroom, I absolutely adored, and I did a really good job at it last semester based on the qualitative data from my spots. It was so good until I called Dr. Thompson. I was like, did you see my spots? He just looked at me. It's like, but for me, the community is my classroom. It extends further beyond these walls. And when we're out in the classroom, I make it clear to the agencies where we're going. We're not just coming to pack food or to fold clothes. We're coming for a learning experience. So there's a classroom setting. We're part of intake. We get to sit down and hear about grant and funding and what you're looking for in an employee and how you're trying to expand the agency. So it's a real learning opportunity. And I like to say, boots on the ground. Again, it doesn't matter if I'm teaching policy, research, practice 3, we're gonna be out in the communities doing activities. And another side note, Joy and Heather, Savannah won't know if you all can point her out. You can do it later. Just like,
She's right there.
Yeah.
She's right there, yeah.
And you all have been so supportive the last 2 weeks, and many of you since I set foot on campus, and I got on my favorite pink suit, so I'm gonna brag a little bit on me, and I'm gonna mean it while I do it, like get ready for it. So in 2021, I received the Presidential Community Engaged Teaching Award, and I was also recognized by the Coral Springs Police Department. They run the summer youth program, and I actually constructed the curriculum, and I teach. And what I've learned is that they're 6 to 11 years old. It's very similar to here. And in 2020, I was the NASW Educator of the Year for the Broward Unit. And in 2019, I was the honorary faculty guest coach for the football team, and that nomination comes from students. Keep going, keep going. That's all I got. So administrative experience, drum roll. Y'all gotta do it, drum roll, louder. Get ready for this one, get ready for this one. Bam. I coordinate the largest BSW program in the state of Florida. I developed a minor in social work. I contribute to the reaccreditation process. I oversee student success conferences. I work closely with the registrar's office, the University Undergraduate Programs Committee. I schedule and assign courses, and I'm assisting in revising the NTT promotion bylaws for instructors. So, service. Those of you, again, that work closely with me know how important service is to me. It's just who I am as a social worker. So here on this fancy little slide with the number 34 in the middle, since I've been here at FAU in 2016, I've been a part of 34 committees at the university, college, school level, professional development, and out in the community. So why FAU, right? Well, I'm coming back in a new suit in August, right? So my research aligns with the neuroscience pillar. We hear about the pillars and platforms and how important that is. And usually when I tell people about my research, it's like, oh, she's trying to force neuroscience on us to sound more important. But my research focuses on the overall well-being. And that's a different approach than criminal justice. From the criminal justice approach, many just focus on the external factors, housing and employment. The value I bring as a social worker, again, is focusing on the overall well-being of the individuals that I work with. My research aligns with many of the university platforms: diversity, peace, justice, human rights, community engagement, and economic development. And it coincides with the forthcoming strategic plan for the college. So we want more collaborations between the two schools in our college. And I have strong interdisciplinary relationships and community partnerships, again, already established. So I'm not moving from Alaska and gotta get situated. And the last thing is one of the most important. So that's one of our students. We went to school from the time we was 3 years old all the way until 12th grade. We're never friends, just lived in the same community. I was teaching over in the liberal arts, bumped into her, was like, oh, why are you here? She's like, I'm a student. I was like, oh, what's your major? She was like, I'm waiting for my social work class to start. So it's like, oh, I'm teaching that class. So she's like, you never taught. How you gonna be a teacher? It's like, I do talk. And she graduated from our program, but the power of that is that she went back into our community, and my aunts and my brothers tell me all the time, I was at the store today, and I saw so-and-so daughter, or so-and-so cousin, and they asked for your phone number. They're thinking about coming back to school. And I had this happen twice with students that I graduated from high school with, but numerous times I have students come after class and ask me, are you Precious? Are you Ivory's sister? Or so-and-so, and they feel more welcome and supported being here. And last, all of you have been so amazing the last couple of weeks with your support. And again, those of you who have supported me from day one. So with my eyes closed, I want to say to all of you, thank you for the support and this opportunity. And that's all I have. Questions?
Thank you, Precious. I guess I'll go first because I have a question. And then I'm going to repeat the questions in the audience for our Zoom viewers.
Am I standing here?
No, it's fine. I wondered first what slide your son didn't like.
The ecological approach, because he's in 4th grade and he's learning the different hierarchy of physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, and he said not social work, society. So
Okay.
that's the model he's sticking to.
Right. He's a super smart young man. So my question was with the qualitative analysis. I believe that you said that you had done a phenomenological method, but your analysis was thematic. You did a thematic.
That's what.
So how did you determine, maybe in your first study, you had 14 in the sample, or no, 19, 10?
10 in the first study.
To develop a theme, kind of what was your process in that?
But putting the data into in vivo, and that wasn't the newer version of in vivo, so I had to hand put the data in and let it select the themes and sub-themes, which is kind of was a learning lesson for me too, because I relied on in vivo.
Right.
Which, that's why I had to do a reanalysis to go back to also look at the data through in vivo and to look at it with my own eyes.
Excellent. And then my final question, thank you, is what has been kind of the new thinking with also looking at women who have experienced incarceration and that process? I'm really excited about that.
Because some of you may know I get the name Precious because I'm the only girl. I have 5 brothers, and before I was born, everybody in the family was having boys, so everybody kind of waited on me. So I'm connected to men, and after this experience with women, I was like, I'm going back to men. Like, it's a little too emotional for me. And I realized that I had biases too that I need to work on if I was going to include women, especially when it comes to parenting.
Well, I really appreciate answering my question, and really appreciate that you incorporate families so much in your research. So that's great. Thank you. So, anyone else in the audience? Everest?
Yeah. I just want to know how fast forward is 6 months from now, and putting yourself in that frame of thinking that you're the selected candidate, right, for the assistant professor position. How would you balance being the director of the, when I coordinate, the director of, but that's what you guys do. How would you coordinate being the director of the BSW program and also balance pretty much being an assistant professor?
Good question. I've been asked that question this morning when I met with the Division of Research. And I'd like to share that I took on this program at the beginning of a pandemic. So when we didn't know what was gonna be, what was gonna happen. And in the process of taking on this large program in the midst of a pandemic, I published, I started a new research study, I continue to collaborate with other agencies. So for me, they come into play both, they enhance one another. And also, just to put this in, I think my role as the coordinator is also important to our student body because that's important to me. I know that I've seen changes shifting from just being an instructor as far as representation. But for me, there's no limit to what I can do. And I just gotta say, and this isn't to butter up Dr. Thompson, Joy, I think I work with a supportive administrative team. And I can comfortably say, I can walk in either one of those offices and say what my goals are or what I would like to do and feel supported. And I can also walk in those offices and say, this may not be good for me right now, and still be supported in that way. So I don't think that's an issue at all.
Thank you very much. I have a second question. It's kind of a research based on what you presented. But you by any chance know which states have more arrests? Because there were so many folks that were arrested within the United States. Is there any particular states that tend to have more arrests yearly than others?
Florida and New York, and they also have more people cycling in and out. And you can take that into consideration. I know California also has a large population of people experiencing homelessness, but you can take that into consideration when you're looking at Florida and New York, the amount of people that's homeless, because that's the majority of the people that's cycling in and out of the jails 2 or more times within 12 months. It's people with battling substance use, people experiencing homelessness.
Hello.
Hi, Danny.
Thank you for sharing. I'm obviously with all of the mentions of homelessness, I'm like, yes, preach. But I was curious as far as after you published the results of that third study, you mentioned you want to return to working more with men in research. Do you have thoughts of what you might want your next study to be about?
But, I think I need to stick with where I'm at now because my work isn't done. I think I just scratched the surface with that first study. And even now when I was putting together this presentation, I was having new ideas and different things that I need to go back and look at. There's still a lot of gaps that need to be filled.
And I was gonna just follow up really quickly to mention what you said, the Palm Beach County Justice Commission, and you're absolutely right that they're really wanting to do more evaluation of different models, and so there's definitely work to be done right here locally. It's great.
Actually, I have a question. It's kind of a follow-up to your question, and it's a very interesting study. Actually, I really like what you did, and especially you mentioned about neuroscience part. So it's a great kind of, when you work with as interdisciplinary, I think it's a really good, fundable kind of project, and you already know what you have to submit, right? Which is great, you already plan out. But do you have specific kind of focus when you're collaborating with neuroscience? There's a neuroscience, scientists, our researcher in our FAU, do you have a specific kind of person you are thinking about in order to collaborate?
Did I blush? So some of you may know that my husband is in the PhD neuroscience program, and we have these conversations daily on how to combine the research. We actually published the ecological approach, that article we published together and combined the two. And it's basically about perception. How these men perceive, how do they perceive their environments, how are they perceived by their environments. So that would be the person that initially I collaborate with.
Actually, it's the reason I was thinking about maybe because your study is based on qualitative study, which is great, and you may also think about some of, for future, I don't know, this is my kind of opinion, so you don't need to take it. Maybe you can combine some of qualitative and quantitative with kind of biological, since you're working with your husband or other person later, more likely, some biological samples.
Makes sense.
Yeah, biomarkers such as to focus on those neuroscience with psychological and social together.
So we,
Biopsychosocial perspective in ecological perspective.
so we can go back to Phoenix's, my son, hierarchy model, and bring that into the research. So make sure that.
Yeah. Interesting, thank you.
All right, so, our online viewers, any questions? I can repeat it to the audience. Okay, that concludes the Q&A.
I couldn't handle that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you all